Greetings everyone, my name is Thuli and I'll be presenting a section on academic writing. Before we start, it's important to note that academic writing has a wide range of sections and a wide range of topics that we could cover and that are covered in the actual OER, but this particular session focuses on writing, reading through writing and writing through reading within academic writing. So first things first, we need to realize and just bear in mind that in academic writing, academic reading and critical thinking, all these concepts and all these things happen almost at the same time. As we read, we critically engage with what we are reading, and then we use writing to make meaning, to make sense of writing. So academic language will involve spoken versus written English, and those are matters of style. And then we have research reading, where we have different types of reading, skimming, scanning, reading strategies, and so on. And then research writing, what we will be focusing on in this section. So, critical thinking and writing involves backing up your claims. As scientific writers, well, scientific writers because academic writing, writing for publication, writing for your thesis and your dissertation, it's all called scientific writing because there's a science behind, right? We are writing based on what we have read before. That is why we back up our claims. And we are careful of making illogical jumps in our reasoning. So we cannot just make general statements or claims that are illogical. We try to make whatever we write logical. And you have to be sensitive of our own assumptions and how these might affect our claims. For example, I mean, look at me. I am a youngish black woman. So sometimes I might have assumptions about other black women, but if that is not based on research, previous research and references, then there's a problem there. It's no longer critical thinking and writing. Finally, we need to realize the importance of checking literature thoroughly to ensure that our understanding is sufficiently researched. That is scientific writing. We cannot just make claims that are not based on literature. That is why we have this session. How do we use literature? How do we use what we have read and use it in our writing? How do we do that? Okay? So I like to term this reading through writing and writing through reading. What does that mean? Academic writing is based on reading, where we make meaning of what we have read through writing. We make sense of our reading through making notes, compiling annotated bibliographies, creating tables to synthesize ideas in an article or a collection of articles. I like this quote from Wallace and Ray, that the skill of self-critical writing lies in convincing your readers to accept your claims. You achieve this through the effective communication of adequate reasons and evidence for these claims. So how do we articulate evidence whenever we make claims? We do that in academic texts, such as research reports, articles, theses, dissertations, proposals, you name it. We depend on what we have read to make sense or articulate our ideas well. And we can do that through directly quoting from literature. We can paraphrase literature. We can summarize what we have learned, what we have read, or we can synthesize. Let's take these individually. What is paraphrasing? Paraphrasing is when we restate an idea or a sentence in our own words. In other words, so-and-so has said this in an article that you have read, and you want to paraphrase that. So when we paraphrase, we can use synonyms, we can rearrange word order in a sentence, or we can restate the idea while retaining the core meaning. Now, I know some of you are thinking plagiarism and some of you are thinking that similarity score. So when we paraphrase, we want to make sure that we don't state exactly what the person says so that we can engage with text and restate ideas. Here's an exercise. Here's a sentence. There are 3 key advantages to studying online: flexibility, affordability, and freedom to study at one's own pace, right? That is our sentence. Now, how would you paraphrase this sentence, okay? So what you could do maybe, instead of starting the sentence with, there are 3 key advantages, you can swap words in the sentence and start with the actual advantages, okay? That's one option. Secondly, instead of saying flexibility, affordability, and freedom, you could use synonyms, affordability, cost effectiveness. See where I'm going with this? You are using your own words to restate the same idea. Secondly, we have summarizing. When we summarize, we express main ideas in our own words. See the difference? Earlier, we were restating the idea. And in this case, in summarizing, we are expressing only the main ideas. So you ask yourself, what is this paragraph about? What is this article about? What is this book about? And what is the main idea? What can we cut out without compromising the essence of the original text? So when we summarize a paragraph, for example, instead of retelling the whole story, you pick only the main ideas. In an article, in a chapter, what are the main ideas there? Here's an exercise. This interest, let's read this paragraph together. This interest can be attributed firstly to the massification of higher education, which has widened participation for large numbers of students who were educationally disadvantaged, and secondly, to the increased student mobility across national borders, which has attracted English second language students to universities where English is the educational lingua franca. Furthermore, the global academic world increasingly privileges English for publication. This is one paragraph. How do we summarize this? Let's see. What are the main ideas in this paragraph? 1, it's the massification of higher education. 2, the increased student mobility. And 3, the privilege of English for publication. Those are the main ideas in this paragraph. So if we had to summarize this paragraph in one sentence, we would mention the 3 reasons for English taking precedence in academic writing. Got it? Let's move on. Synthesizing. And this is where most students struggle and most writers struggle, because sometimes it's easy to restate ideas, paraphrase, to summarize main ideas in the summary writing, but when we synthesize, it gets a little challenging, because when we synthesize, we move beyond what authors say by evaluating, right? Critical thinking. We evaluate what they say, we interpret text, but most importantly, synthesizing involves consulting text from various sources. That is important. When you synthesize, you take from A, B, C, D, E to do what? To create your own interpretation, create a new idea, or create your own argument. Think of definitions when you want to define a concept. You will say author A defines it as, author B defines it as, author C has a bit of a different view, author D explains it even further, and from those authors you are able to create your own definition of the same concept, right? So we critically evaluate, we interpret, and we consult various texts to create a new argument. And this is what scientific writing is. It's not just regurgitating what other people have said, but it's creation of new knowledge through past knowledge, through what others have said before. Here's an exercise that you could do in your own spare time after this video. Consult 5 sources on the topic of plagiarism, okay? And sources could be a journal article, a book, a webinar, conference proceedings, or a certain website on plagiarism, okay? After reading those 5 sources, I need you to extract main ideas from each source. So you could summarize each of those sources. Once you have those main ideas in relation to plagiarism, remember? Once you have those summaries, note the similarities and differences between those sources and how they view plagiarism and how they define plagiarism. And from those similarities and differences, create your own definition of plagiarism. That is synthesis. You are synthesizing based on what others have said. And identify trends that emanate from your sources. An example could be that maybe older articles seem to take a punitive stance towards plagiarism, while maybe recent sources take a more constructive stance. Do you see what you're doing? You are evaluating text, not merely restating. Finally, and this is where also synthesis comes in, create a table or a graphic or a conceptual map of plagiarism. You could have a table maybe on the chronological development of plagiarism. Maybe back in the day, it wasn't even called plagiarism, it was called theft, all right? Or you could create a graphic, you could create a conceptual map on the concept of plagiarism. And then finally, relate the concept of plagiarism to real life context. So what you are doing, you are taking what you have read and you are putting it into practice, into real life context, or even your own study, right? You've seen sentences like, this concept has been defined as, in this study, in this particular paper, in this particular section. What that person is doing, they are taking previous research and they are applying it to their writing context. That is synthesis, right? So when we use referencing as evidence, when we use referencing as part of scientific writing, again, as I mentioned earlier, we can use direct quotation, where we reference ideas using exact words. We can paraphrase, restating ideas in our own words. We can summarize, express main ideas in our own words, or we can synthesize, where we evaluate, interpret ideas from various sources towards creating our own definitions, our own arguments, our own understanding, and even assertions of on certain concepts. Okay, here's a quick example of what direct quotation looks like in Samba 2019, page 29, because it's a direct quotation. Assets, student support is one of the duties of university administrators. Paraphrasing, here's an example. Nsamba stresses that university. Can you see? This person is now paraphrasing, restating an idea. And summarizing, again, you use the main ideas. The duties of academic administrators include you continue. Now here's an example of a synthesis sentence. While the general concession is that academic administrators should 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you put your reference there. Researchers differ on the core responsibilities of support staff in general. And that word there, your key word, is researchers differ. That shows us that you have consulted various sources. And then you give us evidence. So and so argues, while so and so supports, while that person stresses this and that. Can you see? We see those various sources and they come together. What is evident thus is that, right? You are bringing it all together in your synthesis. And that brings us to the end of our presentation on making sense of reading through writing and supporting writing through reading. Remember, in one article, in one paper, in one proposal, in one thesis, you can do all of these. Let's think about the literature review, right? In a literature review, you can use direct quotations. In a literature review, you can paraphrase. In a literature review, you can summarize. Most importantly, your literature review must show evidence of critical thinking through synthesizing. Thank you very much.